Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and I have back with me today Senator Daniel Biss. He is running for Mayor of Evanston. You all, I'm sure everyone has heard him speak, has heard his stance on things, but I always want to do just one last recap because we got that primary coming up Tuesday, February 23rd, and I just want everyone to be as informed as they possibly can. If you haven't gone to early voting, you have until February 22nd for early voting, and the actual date to vote on this primary is February 23rd. So we have back with us today one of the candidates running for mayor, and that is Daniel Biss. Welcome back, Daniel.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me, Malika.
All right. All right. So um, Dolores Holmes always says the title always stays. So Senator Biss.
Daniel is just fine.
Okay.
Daniel is just fine. But also, if I get elected mayor, Daniel's fine then too. It's my
Okay.
name. It works great.
All right. So as this as this campaign has been going on, I'm sure you have learned a lot more about the city, things that have been going on for quite some time because you were handling everything more on a state level, and now it's very local, even though you live here in Evanston. But what has there been anything new that you have learned about? Really, this has been going on. Really.
Well, I wouldn't say about issues, the municipal issues are issues that I've always cared about and always tracked closely. Of course, my passion for those issues is what led me to run in the first place. So it's not as though it's like, oh wow, we really have a climate action and resilience plan, or we're doing reparations in Evanston. Who knew? So that I felt very prepared for. What I will say though, Malika, and of course you and I have talked about this throughout the campaign, but it just keeps hitting me harder and harder with every passing week, is it's just clear how divided we are as a community right now. It's clear how divided we are, how frustrated people are with one another, how quick people are to retreat to their corners and pick sides. And I see this as a moment that we've got so much to accomplish. There's, first of all, around recovering from the pandemic, but even beyond that, just on the big issues that we've talked about so many times in this campaign and that we're all so passionate about, whether it's racial justice or housing or public safety or climate or what have you. We're not going to make the kind of bold, ambitious, sometimes controversial progress on those issues that we need and want unless we can figure out a way to talk about our disagreements in a more constructive fashion. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what I could help do to make everyone be included, give a seat for everyone at the table so we can turn down the volume on some of the more toxic discussions that happen when people actually don't feel like they're being heard.
Mm, mm. Um, well, some of the topics, from the debate, I'll say a recap from the debate. Um, what are your thoughts now on reparations?
Well, they certainly haven't changed. If you want to do a bit of a recap of the debate, I would characterize it as follows. The the project of repairing the harm done to the Black community by this city and this county and this state and this country since 1619 and longer is a giant project that's not going to be solved with any one program or one idea. Uh, Evanston chose to move forward and create a reparations program with a really path-breaking vision. And that vision said, hey, first of all, I got to figure out where the money's going to come from. Then we got to figure out where the money's going to go. The money is going to come from the tax from the sale of legal recreational use of cannabis. And the principle there is, hey, listen, the war on drugs was racist. It was racist in its effect without question. We all agree on that. And I think most of us would argue that it was racist in its intent as well. And because that racism did harm to the Black community, that harm needs to be repaired. And so we ought to at least, as a down payment, use the revenue brought in by that tax to fund repair work. And then the second question says, well, where's it going to go? And the answer that the designers of the reparations program have given there is said, well, hey, let's ask ourselves, what is the most direct way in which Evanston municipal policy has exacerbated inequity and furthered the racial wealth gap. And probably the number one example there is through housing policy, where the city has enforced segregation, and that policy of enforced segregation just stole wealth from Black Evanston. And so the idea is, hey, let's use the money in this reparations fund to close the racial wealth gap by funding grants for housing purchase. And there's criticism of that, which I think is totally legitimate, which says, listen, reparations doesn't mean you help me buy a house. Reparations mean you repair the inequity that exists and is manifested in a lot of different ways. And to fully do that work, a cash payment is needed. Oh, and by the way, not everyone is looking to buy a house. Not everyone is even owns a house right now against which they could take a mortgage. And so reparations that are tied to homeownership inevitably leave some folks out. I think everybody would agree that criticism of the program is valid. What emerged during the debate was a very, very stark difference of opinion between myself and the other two candidates about what to do with that. I think their attitude was, whoa, this was a mistake. We should not have created a reparations program that is designed in this way. So we got to unwind it and then do it again better. And what I would say is, on the contrary, I think the size of the project that we are trying to take on by repairing the inequities created by our society between white and Black Evanstonians is a massive project. We can't possibly hope to solve it in one shot. And rather than say this specific program is incomplete and doesn't get the whole job done, and therefore we got to go back to the drawing board and do it differently, I would say this program is incomplete and doesn't get the full job done because no initial step could possibly be complete or get the whole job done. And so this is a good starting point. We should make it work. We should implement it effectively. We need to have a broad set of voices at the table as we're making that implementation work, and then expect that over time we're going to have to build on it in a variety of ways. And I think it was an interesting set of exchanges. And we sort of went back and forth on it during the course of the discussion. And my attitude is, it is very, very difficult to use government as a lever to solve giant problems in one fell swoop. So you figure out a first step, you take a bite, you make it work, you use that as an opportunity to grow. And I think that if we instead expect that the first step is going to also be the last step, we'll actually never be able to take the first step. And that would be the saddest outcome of all.
Because there's no real blueprint, we are the first.
That's right.
Simmons is the first leader in the entire country to take this first step. So she doesn't have a blueprint in which to follow. So with that, I think everybody is very understanding too. But because there isn't a blueprint, and the community is speaking, that we won't look as strong if everyone who gets this first 400,000 is maybe 10, 15 families, individuals rather, that can actually fit in one photo op. So does that say, oh, Evanston did great because look, 10 people in the picture got the first benefit from it? I think that's one way people are looking at it. And then another is I think you've come to understand or see that there's some trust issues with the council. With the council and then some stakeholders. So if it's rolling out where people are splitting up, well, I decide these Black people get it and these Black people don't, and that's how they're going to start it. And there's already some distrust there. So what do you see why people are not trusting that the rest of the reparations program, the rest of the remaining of the 10 million is going to come out beneficial to 12,000 Black families in Evanston?
Well, I think that trust is always a concern, and I think that it's a real mistake to pretend that the Black community in Evanston is ever going to be a monolith. I mean, this is a very diverse, large community. You've got folks who've been here for many generations. You've got folks who are new in town. It's a very diverse community. I think there's always going to be divides. I think the challenge is that, again, the size of the Black community in the city combined with the size of the racial wealth gap, combined with a number of different ways that the racial inequity of America expresses itself in Evanston, from housing segregation to educational outcomes, to health outcomes, to nutrition, to public safety, of course, and more. What that means is whatever you start with, whatever that first step is, it will not be able to reach everybody. It will not be able to help everyone. And so the question to me isn't how do we help everyone at once and solve the whole problem at once? It's how do we make sure that we take a first step that will then make it easier for us to take a second step, not one that will allow people to declare victory and quit walking. So do I understand why some people have trouble trusting the government? Yes. Do I understand especially why Black Americans looking at the history in this country have trouble trusting the government? You bet I do. Um, the only solution to that, though, is to behave in a trustworthy fashion. That's the only solution I know about. Talking forever about how great we are, trust us this time, will accomplish nothing and should accomplish nothing. But conducting ourselves in a trustworthy manner, I think, is the only way to begin to repair that gap.
Okay, well, I'm a Black woman, so how do I conduct myself in a trustworthy manner?
Oh, I mean, talk about the government. I mean, I understood your question about the lack of trust that certain people in the Black community have for our city government.
Mm.
The government's response to that challenge needs to be to act in a trustworthy fashion.
Mm. Do you think we've ever trusted the government? I mean, has the government ever, there's always someone on the council that's totally not for the people, completely just not for, this is how I see the council. We have some aldermen up there who are really for the people. They got involved for the people. And then you have aldermen, I even see it in the candidates. Then you have candidates and you have some aldermen who are already sitting who it's about power and separating who has and who doesn't, who gets and who won't. Um, and you totally see it as like a system. And then you have the ones that are about the cause. Um, and I think that's a lot of the issues here in Evanston is the trust. And if you're elected mayor, how will you get the people to trust our council again?
Well, let me address what you said in order, because you said something that I do want to take exception with. I don't look at this as different categories. I've got strong disagreements with every single member of council, and areas of agreement probably with every single one. I don't think there are members of council who are just, hey, we're here for the people, we're here to do the people's work, and we are on the side of the angels, and then some other members who are on the side of power or entrenched interest and so forth. I think, I mean, frankly, I don't think being on the Evanston City Council is all that glamorous a job. I don't think it comes with all that much real power, by the way. You have to really work meticulously behind the scenes to get four of your colleagues to agree with you to even be able to pass an ordinance. I take a good faith assumption with the members of council and all the candidates running that they're doing what they see as being in the interest of the people. There are some who I think do a much better job of that in practice than others, but I think it's really important that we try to ascribe as much good faith as possible and acknowledge that there're just going to be areas of disagreement. And then sometimes we'll have big fights about those areas of disagreement, and I'll be ready to fight like hell and hopefully win those fights because I have strong feelings about what the right policy is. But if you approach the council with the idea that they're all people who want to do the right thing, but some of them have ideas that I really disagree with about what the right thing is, then you've got 9 people that you can sometimes work with, even though you can't work with all of them at any given time. If instead you say, man, these 3 are awful and these 3 are good and these 3 are somewhere in between, well, then you've only got 6 you can ever work with. And so I think that's part of what's gotten us into this place. And we're so in our corners, we're so in our trenches that we're not able to talk with folks that we can't agree with. And I think that's a big part of it. So then you ask, the second part of your question is, how do you restore some of that trust? I think a lot of it is assisted by a campaign, right? So we're going to elect 9 members of city council in April. And I hope that every single person who we will have elected will have made real promises to the community. And the act of campaigning on a promise and getting elected and keeping it is itself an act that restores trust. And so I hope that we'll have 9 members of council who will remember what they promised during the course of the campaign and be ready to make good in a visible way on those promises to build that trust. I think the other component of trust, beyond just doing what you said you were going to do, which God knows that's important, the other component is transparency. I think right now we seem to be in a situation where it's very easy for people who are suspicious of council to become more suspicious, because half the time you can't figure out what really happened behind the scenes. You can't figure out what back channel discussions led a certain ordinance to come up for a vote. You can't really figure out who was behind it. You can't really figure out what led a certain project to move forward. You can't figure out what behind the scenes conversations are going on about important issues and somehow are not visible, even though we have the Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meetings Act. And so I think a radical vision of transparency that really lays things out before the public in advance, before the decisions are made, before the policies are formulated, so that we have a community process where we come together jointly to figure out what we're going to do instead of just waiting for the last minute and then soliciting public input. I think that's really, really critical, because if the decision is made in advance and then you solicit public input and then ignore it, it's pretty hard for the person who gave public input to feel a high level of trust with the people who made that decision.
Yeah, I think that was a discussion we've had, is that I think the people are just really tired of that method, of making us feel like we have input, but really you already made the decision. So, even with the Civic Center, many people believe that decision has already been made. And they're going to move it downtown Evanston, and they're going to make the residents feel like they have some say in it. So that's going to be some more heat that's going to come to the council, that'll probably be there. Like if you're elected with the new council, oh yeah, it's coming.
Yeah, great. So I think that civic example is a great example. It's worth kind of unpacking, right? Because the council voted, I forget if it was last Monday, very recently, to basically do a modest contract with a consultant to assess the potential of a TIF that would include the Civic Center. That decision itself is a no big deal decision, right? That's, if you actually take that at face value, they're just looking at options, trying to understand what's available. It makes perfect sense. Of course you should do that. But if you look at what residents said at public comment, it's clear they weren't saying don't enter into that contract with that consultant to study the question. They were saying, whoa, 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 we can tell you've already made up your mind. What is happening? And the fact that residents feel that that's occurring is really part of the problem. It's a symptom of the breakdown in the communication between the government and the governed, and we've got to cure that.
Mm, mm. Boy, the new council, I feel for you all, because you all got your hands full. Just the whole restoring the trust is going to be probably priority number one as soon as everyone takes a seat on the council, is restoring that trust. Um, because it has truly been damaged. And I read your statement in regards to Alderman Ann Rainey. That's one of the many aldermen that have caused many people not to trust the council for some time now. Um, so I appreciate that you put that last statement out,
Thank you.
to not accept her endorsement because of how she was handling the situation. And I think how she handled that situation, that was just absolutely horrible. Uh, we've gotten so used to it. We've gotten so used to it. Not just from her, but from other councilmen up there. That's why I say
Mm,
that there's some up there who are about the power, and they may think they're acting from their heart, but how it's landing is you got power issues. And then there
mm,
are some aldermen who would never in a million years call a black man scary or shush a black man. Alderman Judy Fisk was infamous for that, shushing him from doing his job. Uh, it was just some ugly display throughout the past 4 years that caused the people to be like, and that, I mean, that's just about one man. So imagine things that have happened throughout the community. So that's why I say you all really, the new council is going to have their hands really full, because uh, that was a lot of hurt and damage, and it's caused some major trust issues.
Yeah, and listen, we're gonna have a lot on our plates even
Very,
beyond that,
yeah.
right? I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic still.
Mhm.
We've lost 110 people,
Mhm.
lost businesses. Our high school is still closed, and a lot of our elementary and middle schools are far below full capacity. There's a lot of pain in this community right now, um, and a lot to do. And I think a moment of opportunity to really do great things. Um, but it's not going to happen without um, a change in the tone. It's not going to happen without a collaborative spirit. And again, I think it's really important to say this: collaborative spirit doesn't mean we have consensus, right? We're never going to have agreement on the things that we need to do. I get that. I appreciate that, and my record, I think, shows me willing to move forward on difficult, controversial projects if I think they're good for the community, and sometimes to win really tough fights to make those things move forward. But what we've done now is we've gotten ourselves into a place where we're so focused on the fight that we have lost sight of the goal. And that, I think, is really hurting our community.
Well, for us to have a goal, we all got to pretty much have the same goal. And I think the struggle is in some of us got a different goal, and others in power have a different goal. So, I mean, that takes us back to COVID. It takes us to reparations. It takes us to the city budget, affordable housing. Everybody's got a goal, and but the people that make the decisions, their goal seems to, at least over the past 4 years, I'll say, has been very different from the community's goal.
Well, I would just again stress, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but the community is not a monolith. The community is not a monolith, and I think that I mean, I worry about this so much, Malika. It just eats me alive that we particularly, the combination of social media and a pandemic is really, really bad for giving us the ability to get exposed to a lot of different points of view, right? Because we're all trapped in our houses, and then our way to see the world is through things like Facebook, which kind of lets us see what our friends have to say. And I think that we have wound up, one thing you do see as a candidate, and I'm sure all the candidates who you speak to would back me up on this, is you see that there are different bubbles that are not talking to each other, but that are very, very passionate about opposite things, and that are convinced that they are the people, and the other side is some, couple fringe weirdos. And I take the position that nobody in this town is a fringe weirdo. On the contrary, I listen to everybody. I lift up every voice. I care about every point of view. And I know that we're not going to have consensus. And it's not about, oh, it's obvious. Everyone knows the people want this. This is the good thing. And anybody who disagrees is just on the side of the bad guys. It's more that we have tough disagreements, and we have to figure out a way to move forward in a way that allows us to say, we disagreed about this particular issue, but we're acting in service of this goal of equity, of this goal of sustainability, of this goal of affordability, of this goal of shared safety. And I think the process of articulating those shared goals will then make it easier for us to have a platform on which to have constructive disagreements.
Well, as far as affordable housing, what do you think is the shared goal there?
Well, I think that affordability is it's like everything. It's people are being driven out of Evanston, and that's a tragedy. People who want to come here, who would enrich our cultural life and make life here more vital and exciting, and not to mention add to our tax base so that the rest of us have to pay less, are not able to afford to come. We are so proud of our diversity, but we're pretty darn segregated, diverse community as well, which has its roots in both zoning and affordability. So I think tackling the affordability issue is just critical. And I want to say something explicitly. I think everyone agrees with this, but I think it's important to name it. Affordable housing is not one problem, right? There's affordable housing for seniors. There's affordable housing for families with children. There's affordable housing for families in deep poverty. There's affordable housing for kind of middle-class working families. There's the question of racial integration and preserving and expanding our Black and brown populations in Evanston. All of these are non-identical but real affordable housing problems, and we've got to tackle all of them. And so I want to say a few things about what I want to do. First of all, we need to have a clear long-term plan that states our goals, that's public about how much progress we've made toward those goals, that holds us accountable when we don't make those goals, and that names what we're all about, which is affordability and equity. We need to, that includes a plan for how we're going to use our affordable housing fund. It includes a set of goals for how many affordable units of what different type we want by when. It includes tracking our progress toward those goals and holding ourselves accountable if we don't get there. We need to strengthen the inclusionary housing ordinance, which has been improved, and that's excellent, but needs to be improved more by increasing the fee in lieu so developers can't just buy their way out of actually producing the units on site. And we need to make sure that it's generating units for families living in real poverty, not just families near the area median income, as well as families with children. But there's so much more than that. And I worry that sometimes we kind of begin and end affordable housing conversation in Evanston by talking about the inclusionary housing ordinance, but we got to do more. We got to, for example, rein in exclusionary housing, which has made it impossible to have affordable units in most of the city. And we created a policy recently to allow for accessible dwelling units, or ADUs, or some people call them coach houses or granny flats or something. That's a good policy because it's creating new affordable units on site without requirement of putting a single shovel in the ground. It also allows families to age in place and allows for intergenerational housing, which is really positive. We need to do a better job of partnering with the federal government. The home funding is an important tool. We need to advocate with Congresswoman Chakowski and Senators Durbin and Duckworth to expand it. We need to partner with the Illinois Housing Development Authority and the Housing Authority of Cook County to maximize every opportunity. We've got to do a better job of enforcing the rules that are already on the books, right? If you're not supposed to discriminate against returned citizens who are on their way back from the criminal justice system, or to discriminate based on income source, for example, so Section 8 housing vouchers should not be a reason to not let someone rent from you. And yet those aren't enforced very well. We could do a much better job of that. So there is a number of different things that we need to work on, and they're difficult, but they're doable, and they're going to require a real focus on affordability as a linchpin to allow us to have the Evanston that we say we believe in having.
Mm, mm. Well, I like those goals. I like I like those goals. Um, I
Thank
like
you.
those goals, and I remember having a conversation when I had pretty much just moved back to Evanston. Um, I had noticed, I was like, so from my understanding, there's a mad exodus, just going back to um, the amount of Black families who have had to leave Evanston. They told me that that was absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, so they were like, that's just that bubble of people that think that that's
Mm.
not the truth. And this was a white woman in media here, right here in Evanston. She told me that is ridiculous. Um, so I was like, that's interesting. Um, so I'm glad to hear those goals. I'm glad to
Well, I
hear.
mean, who in this town doesn't know Black Evanstonians who live in Skokie, right? I mean, that's, it's got some of the most prominent leaders in the Black community in Evanston, in fact, have moved to Skokie for reasons of cost.
Hmm. Hmm. And going back to COVID-19 and the vaccine, I do see light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank God.
Uh, thank God. I think North Shore and St. Francis, I think they've done a phenomenal job um, in providing service and education to the community. Um, but you still have those who are not trusting of the vaccine,
Yeah.
um, and some actually went through the process of filling out the work online to get the vaccine, even though they're deathly afraid of it, but they're going to go ahead and do it.
Mm.
But their number hasn't come up yet. So how do you see speeding up that process? I just feel like the quicker we get through this vaccine, we can get back to some degree of normalcy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. Um, the bad news is that we're kind of at the mercy of the federal and state governments to get us the quantity of vaccine that, obviously we can push as hard as possible. And as mayor, I will push as hard as humanly possible.
Mhm.
But we're not producing the vaccine here. It's not sort of bidding on an open market. It kind of gets allotted to us. And frankly, it's not been enough. It's not been enough. And that's created, I think, a lot of the frustration in the community that people, are waiting and waiting and waiting. I think the city, there were some pretty serious hiccups initially around communication, but since then they've repaired a lot of that, and they've been clear with folks, and they're going through people systematically by age. So, year by year, if you're, I think they're on the 74s right now, but the 73s are around the corner. And I think that makes sense. My understanding is that the system they've got up in place at the Levy Center is running very smoothly and effectively. That's all terrific. I do question why we didn't do a better job of getting teachers vaccinated quickly, especially now the District 65 is open. I really feel for teachers who were simply unable to get vaccinated and yet got sent back into school in a building. Um, and obviously we'd all love to see the schools open as soon as it's safe and responsible. And so I'd like to see teachers vaccinated, for that reason as well. And for instance, 202. Um, so there's plenty to be proud of, but my God, so much to build on and so much to improve on as well. Um, the trust problem is catastrophic, and it's so serious. And I am deeply respectful of the fact that when someone comes to the Black community in the United States of America and says, "Hey, I'm a doctor from the government and I'm here to help," people get nervous. People get nervous, and that's a reality that the U.S. government brought on itself by virtue of its own behavior over the course of these centuries. Um, I don't think that a white mayor is going to be able to address that, but I think there are so many beloved, prominent, trusted community leaders in the African American community here in Evanston who have already begun to play a role in expressing why they believe the vaccine is safe, and looking not just saying trust me, but saying trust what I've read, trust the research that I've done. Here's a reason why I feel confident this is safe. And we just have to use the city's platform and megaphone to get those voices out as much as possible. Because the truth of the matter, of course, is that people of color have been disproportionately impacted by this virus from day one, disproportionately afflicted with the disease, disproportionately, tragically, no longer with us, disproportionately among frontline workers, disproportionately harmed in their ability to maintain work. And that gives us a moral responsibility to ensure that people of color are at the front of the line to get vaccinated and then be safe. And instead, if that lack of trust makes that impossible to do, then we have another injustice on our hands. And the city has just got to do everything it can to avoid that possibility.
Do you think they should maybe think about changing, like you said, teachers definitely should have received the vaccine um, immediately, especially since so many parents out there, again, these different bubbles, so
Mhm.
many parents out there are like on the attack that they want their kids back in school. They could care less about a virus. They want their kids back at school. And then you had parents who were like, no, don't risk my child's life. I don't want my child going back to school. That, yes, their teachers definitely should have been in that first group, all of them done by now. Um, and because so many Black and Brown are impacted by the virus in such a much higher percentage than white, do you think they can change that program and how they have it set up where they actually go into the where it's majority Black and Brown people in the community of Evanston, um, or have them come to the hospital or wherever they're going to be given the vaccine, uh, and take care of them immediately because they are the ones who are dying disproportionately,
Yeah.
infected disproportionately over others.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I will be the first to admit I was not in the room. I don't know the mechanism by which it was decided that the Levy Center would be the city's distribution location. But I think having the place that we distribute the vaccine be located in the most affected neighborhoods so that people who are hurting the most have the easiest access makes all the sense in the world. I completely agree with you about that.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I think they should really look into that if because the numbers are saying it, like the documentation is saying it. So I would think you would focus that vaccine on the people who are dying at a higher uh, percentage than anyone else.
You bet. And of course, the opposite is happening. Right? I'm sure you've seen some of these maps. There was a famous one that circulated around Chicago. Here's the map of who's been positive, and here's the map of who's been vaccinated, and they're opposite. Right? The highest vaccination rates are in the lowest infection areas,
Mhm.
and I guess we shouldn't be surprised, right? There's one map. Someone said in response, "There's one map of Chicago." Right? Whether you're talking about affordable housing or income or health outcomes or vaccination rates or access to healthy food or safety in the neighborhood. There's one map of Chicago, and basically the injustices are felt in every different aspect of life in Black and brown communities. And so it's no surprise that we would see the same thing here when it comes to the vaccine. But it's a tragedy, and it's a moral crime. And so I agree with you that we shouldn't be vaccinating those who are the most affected communities last. We should be vaccinating them first.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, yeah, I think the new council should definitely sit down with somebody at the city in North Shore and St. Francis and work that out. Um, I got you for less than 10 minutes. Um, so, okay, so we covered COVID-19, affordable housing. I love the vision of affordable housing. Absolutely. Um, the trust, I pray for the new council, how that's going to happen, how that's going to work out. Um, in terms of other things that are going on in Evanston, there's a list of things going on in Evanston. The budget is always, I don't think anyone ever agrees on the budget. Um,
Yeah.
that's my heart goes out to everybody who has to deal with Evanston city budget. And I feel like Erica Storley, I don't know, but I feel like she wants to make everybody happy, and sometimes making some missteps here, listening to a certain bubble and
Hmm.
not listening to all the other bubbles out here. Um, have you had conversations with Erica Storley, the city manager, already, or?
I have. She's made herself available to candidates who reach out, obviously on a very limited basis. She certainly wouldn't show favoritism to any one candidate or another, but she's been responsive to questions on a limited basis when candidates reach out. Obviously, if I'm fortunate enough to be successful in the election, the relationship would become much more intense. But I've been fortunate that the city staff, I think, are really taking a classy approach and saying, if you're running for office, we're here to answer your questions, because whoever wins, we want them to be as informed as possible.
Mhm. What are your thoughts on the city budget right now? What would I don't know if you've talked to her about what you would see doing different than the way the city budget is going right now. Just what do you think of the city budget right now, and what would you change? Because
Yeah.
clearly, I mean, we're in debt, and even with COVID-19, the whole pandemic, like everyone felt like the city budget was supposed to look different because we are in a pandemic, and actually it was looking the same. Raise property taxes. That seems to be the go-to. Raise the property taxes no matter what. And
Mm.
it's like during a pandemic when people don't even know if they have a job to go back to, their business is hanging on by a thread. Um,
Yeah. One thing that really, and I say this with all due respect, that really puzzled me
mm,
was, the city staff, including Erica Storley, presented a budget to the council weeks, maybe even months before it was supposed to be voted on. And there was a little bit of discussion here and there, kind of some sniping back and forth between council members. Then everybody kind of went on to the next issue. And then they talked about it at a subsequent meeting, but before the final meeting, and same kind of deal, like some sniping back and forth, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but no real, no real kind of deep discussion. And then came the time that they were going to actually vote on the budget, the council meeting itself. And by the time it got to that council meeting, I think the point that you just made sort of it hit some of the members of council. Wait a second, there's a pretty big property tax in here, and we've got tons of people out of work, and people are hurting, and businesses are closed. And does it really make sense to raise property taxes during a pandemic? And so in the meeting, when they were gonna pass the budget, they started throwing out all kinds of different ideas. And what if we take this out? What if we put this in? What if we change this number? What if we change that number? It was like watching 9 people work out the budget on a napkin at a bar. Only I guess they were at 9 different bars because it was all on Zoom, so they couldn't even look at the same napkin. Um, and they wound up making some changes and reining in the property tax increase by a lot, which obviously is a good thing, and then passing a budget that night. And I mean, Malika, I have to tell you, I was an Illinois state legislator for 8 years, and I did not think that I was gonna come to the Evanston City Council and say, maybe y'all ought to emulate the way Illinois makes its budgets. But this kind of last minute seat of the pants, let's throw some ideas at the wall right before we vote approach was something that genuinely I wouldn't have even seen happen in Springfield. And so I think we need to just overhaul all of that. We need to have an open process with the community, with every member of council, and with the staff to really talk about options. Not the day that it's going to pass, not even the day that the staff's presentation is first made, but before, to talk about priorities, to talk about goals. One thing that was never really laid out for the residents in a particularly clear way was, okay, the proposed property tax is this, here's what we're getting for it. Here's what we would have to give up if we were to eliminate the property tax increase entirely. And I think people are smart, people are mature, people can handle tough choices, but you got to lay out the information for them. You got to really communicate in an honest and open way. Look, here are the options. Here are some different ideas. They're all kind of bad because our budget situation isn't great, but here's one sacrifice we could make. Here's a different type of sacrifice we could make. How do you weigh them against each other and then get real public input in response to those options? But if you just do it at the last minute, literally minutes before passing it, I think you're not going to get as good an outcome, and you're definitely not going to have the community's trust that you're going to have as good an outcome, because who's at the table? By definition, if it's happening live in the last council meeting, no one was at the table besides those 9 folks, and that's not the way we want to make a budget.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. That it all goes back to trust. Like the trust has been like, wait, you're doing this how? Like what? That's how, I can't speak for the entire community, because I know, there are bubbles, but for the most part, I feel like there's one big bubble that's sitting there like serious trust issues. Serious trust issues. But I'm glad you acknowledged how that went down, because that was crazy. A lot of people saw that as crazy. But we're in some crazy times right now. So,
Me
sometimes I
too.
don't understand why it's such a rush with the council. Like, it's like this rush to vote on certain things. And I know some things require some urgency, but I don't know. It's almost like they hurry and try to sneak it in when they know people aren't going to be attending the council meeting during a certain time. Like, let's vote on it now when nobody's paying attention, and get it in and just say, oh, well, too late. You didn't show up to the council meeting. You didn't, yeah,
Yeah.
that's another thought.
Yeah, I think that the question of timing is really interesting and important, right? I do believe that government moves slowly sometimes, right? And there are some issues. I mean, think about, there's some issues we've been talking about for 10 years, and we haven't yet taken real action on them. And so I think there's sometimes a feeling of, we've got to just get the votes and then move, because it's so hard to ever move. And I'm really sympathetic to that. I'm impatient. I hope I'm elected, and I can't wait if I'm elected to do some of these things that'll make a difference in the community. I think if you invest some real time and effort on the front end in laying the groundwork to build community support, then you save yourself a lot of heartache on the back end where people feel like, whoa, where'd that come from? And then it starts to look like things really got rushed through when folks weren't paying attention.
Hmm. Hmm. That takes us back to reparations. COVID, I give them a pass on, absolutely, because that was an urgent situation and no blueprint in place, absolutely. But thank you so much for your time today, Daniel.
Thank you.
I know this the primary, they're in early voting right now, and actual primary election date is February 23rd. Um, have you been out there in this crazy weather?
I was actually out there today at early voting. So early voting is open tomorrow, Sunday, 10 to 4, and Monday from 9 to 5. And then, of course, polls are open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Tuesday, the 23rd. So today I was out there, and I got to tell you, Malika, the early voting turnout for the first week and a half was dismal. It was just dismal. Now, part of that, of course, was the weather. I think part of that was because folks weren't really focusing on the race yet. But today it was a different story. So the last couple of days, there's been really elevated turnout. I think people are tuning in, they're paying attention, they want to have their voices heard, and that's exciting. Because I think one problem we have in Illinois is we schedule these municipal elections in the winter or the spring when folks aren't really paying attention, and we tend to have lower turnout because of that. And I would love to see, win or lose, as high turnout as possible because I want everybody's voice to count.
Mm, mm. Well, thank you for that, Daniel. And I'm gonna let you get going. I know you probably got a ton of Zooms to hop on.
There's a lot to do. We're getting down to the wire.
Getting down to the wire. All right. Well, thank you so much. And please let everyone know how they can contact you with further questions.
Great. You can visit our website, danielbiss.com, or check us out on social media at Daniel Biss. Feel free to send me an email, daniel@danielbiss.com, and we'll get back to you ASAP. Would love to hear questions and concerns and ideas as well, because we're going to only solve these problems if everybody's at the table and everybody's voice matters.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. And have a good evening. Stay warm and stay
You
safe.
too.
All
You
right.
too, my friend. It's
All
great
right.
talking with you, Malika.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right. Okay, this has been Malika, Evanston Live TV. You all heard it. This is early voting. Make sure your voice is heard. Do not be one of those people, as Daniel just did. What? Wait, what just happened? And you look up and you got a whole new council, and you're like, wait, what happened? Some of you don't even know what ward you live in. You don't even know who your alderman is. So come on, people, let's get engaged and make sure you get out there and vote, 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 vote. So early voting is happening right now, and actual primary election date is February 23rd, this coming Tuesday. So you can go back, feel free, go back in the archives of Evanston Live TV, look at many of the interviews and the forums, the mayoral debate that we've done, even District 65 forum. Just get to know who these candidates are and stay informed, stay engaged as to what's going on. Because sometimes it's the people's fault because nobody was paying attention and then decisions were made. And then sometimes it is the council. I'm just going to say it. So, all right, you all stay tuned here at Evanston Live TV. We have many more amazing guests coming up. Stay warm.